Hi, everyone. I hope that you are getting ready for an awesome lunch and learn. Today, we are going to be talking with AJ Huth from the Center about Rainbow Capitalism. And so we will get started right now. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's presentation, which is an educational celebration of Pride Month. Every month, Kengen delivers a focused presentation that is relevant to the national diversity calendar, and June is Pride Month. If you missed us earlier this month, we featured Cy Burnaby, the Executive Director of Gender Justice Nevada, who did a fantastic presentation on the evolution of the LGBT plus community, pronouns, and what not to say. If you're interested, you can view that presentation on demand. Today, I have the very distinct pleasure to feature a very good friend of mine, AJ Holly Huth from the Center, and we will discuss a very unique topic, rainbow capitalism. Again, not a conversation you want to miss. My name is Kennedy Cobbin Richardson, and I am a partner at Kengen, and we are a consulting firm specializing in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We bring an innovative and holistic approach to developing people, teams, and culture in organizations who pursue purpose as well as profit. We are laser focused on actual behavioral change by building a groundswell of DEI champions that are influential at every level of the organization. Today, we will discuss the DEI definitions that are important to this conversation, how Pride Month began with the Stonewall riots, and of course, rainbow capitalism. And so our customized training helps people, one, acquire the essential skills to have courageous conversations, two, acknowledge and accept the history and context of injustice in America, three, our training helps you to articulate the lived experiences of marginalized groups, and finally, help you act as an ally to accelerate DEI where you live, work, and play. Now, a little bit about myself. My passion really is helping people become allies with marginalized communities. I am a DEI consultant for multinational corporations and nonprofits. I have significant experience and expertise in workforce development, youth development, nonprofit management, healthcare, and financial services. My passion is helping people embrace both themselves and society on their journey to allyship. And you can see to the right, if you need to get in touch with me, there's my email, my LinkedIn, as well as my website. So the first thing is to be clear on the language. And I have a diversity vocabulary that has over 200 words that are really necessary for people to have meaningful conversations, but you have to know that you mean the same thing. And so we've been talking about ally a few times in the last few minutes, and I just want to be clear that you know what ally means. An ally is a person of one social identity group who provides actionable support. The key word is actionable support to members of another group, typically a member of the dominant group, forming an alliance with marginalized individuals or groups that is being discriminated against or treated unjustly. So it is different than being an advocate, but an ally really provides support. And we're going to talk about how to be an ally to the LGBTQ plus community. Another key definition to understand is when someone is being performative ally. And that is those with privilege who profess solidarity with a cause in order to distance themselves from potential scrutiny. So if you're in a crowd and everyone is talking a certain way, then you kind of perform like a play, like an actor, and just say the things that you know will be more accepted in that crowd. Another definition that I want you to keep in mind is pink economy, which is different than rainbow capitalism. And so pink economy is a term to describe the purchasing power of the community made up of non-heterosexual people, that is lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, intersex, and more. What is interesting to note is that the pink economy, if it were a country of its own, it would be the 5th largest economy in the world. And so there's a reason why rainbow capitalism is taking the form that it is. Rainbow capitalism refers to the incorporation of the LGBT movement into capitalist dynamics. And it is a term that is used critically because it implies the commercialization of that community and its discourse. And this will be the lion's share of our conversation with AJ to talk about how the community feels, understands, and what we need to do in order to do this. This is a slide that she shared with me. And this is the question I have for anyone watching. Am I being a good ally? And she's going to talk about virtue signaling, donations, volunteering, and voting. I can still play the video around the beginning, but I think I'll do that in the end so that we can go ahead and jump right into the conversation with AJ. So AJ, I tried to set it up so that people are at least educated for the conversation around what it means to be a good ally, and talking about specifically the rainbow capitalism. And so I'd like to get into that. But first, if you can just give us a quick introduction on who you are and how you came, to be an ally and advocate for the community.
Thanks for having me. My name is AJ. I am the Youth and Family Services Manager at the LGBTQIA+ Center of Southern Nevada. We are a true community center. We help everybody, but our focus is the LGBTQ+ communities. We have been in the community almost 30 years. I have been in my position at the center about 7.5 years, working with youth primarily. And I get into all of these other areas of advocacy as well. And so this is a passion of mine. I really enjoy talking about these topics with people who may not know much about the community, and maybe not understand, why we do have Pride Month and stuff like that. And so anytime I get a chance to have these conversations, I'm very eager to do so. Also really, want to make sure that everybody knows that, our center is there to support you. I am very accessible. If anybody has follow-up questions, it's not hard to find me on our website at thecenterlv.org. Yeah, I mean, rainbow capitalism, it's not something that I get to talk about too much. Usually just going over the definitions of, who we are and our history and things like that. And so I really am excited to talk about this topic with you.
Great. So I'm certainly familiar with the passion that you have. And so I'm so glad that you were able to take this opportunity to talk. And so why don't we just go ahead and if you can tell us, how Pride Month began and has evolved over the last 50 years or so.
Yeah. So, I, kind of like to look back to move forward, because there were there was a gay liberation front. There were other movements that were happening before Stonewall in 1969. In the 50s, even, there were groups like Mattachine Society, Daughters of Bilitis. They actually went out and marched in Washington. The kind of goal of that, though, is that we had to look like everybody else. And so, men were told to wear suits. Women were told to, dress in dresses, and just so that, it could look like, have this optic of, look, we're just like you and we need rights too. We just love differently. And in those beginnings, the trans community has just been kind of left out of the movement. And when you get to like later on, the Compton cafeteria riots, for example, in San Francisco, in the Tenderloin district, this is where a lot of trans women, drag queens, the areas that they had been kind of forced into by police presence. The police were kind of the original people that were harassing the LGBTQ community. And at that time, like in the 60s, when you have all this stuff going on, right? There's all of these movements happening kind of all at the same time. I think that those big movements really got people motivated to start fighting back and demanding their rights to personhood. And I think that sparked a lot of this. And, Compton's cafeteria, the trans women in there were just tired of being harassed by the police. And, then you have this big movement at Stonewall in 1969, where, there was a lot of these gay bars were run by the mafia. And even though they were paying the police off, they still would raid the bars. And so it was quite common for the bars to get raided. If they knew that this was coming up, they'd try to give people a heads up. You could switch partners if you were dancing, things like that. And people were just fed up with it. It was the day that Judy Garland died. It was hot. Yeah. And so Judy Garland was a huge icon in the community, and, people were kind of grieving, and they just had had enough. I think the significance of Stonewall also was that it wasn't just a one and done kind of thing. It was several days long. And it really did spark this movement of human rights in our community. And there's one person that I like to point out, Stormé de Lavier. She was a lesbian. She might, identify differently these days. But she grew up in New Orleans and had a Black mother and a white father. And so she was used to getting harassed her whole life. And she wanted to be a singer. And so she, would go out in like dresses with her hair done and stuff, being a singer. And back then there was a rule that you had to wear like 3 articles of clothing that matched your, gender assigned at birth. And she kept getting harassed because the police thought she was a man. And so she just decided, fine, I'm going to just start, dressing like a man, and became a male impersonator, which we would now maybe call a drag king. And, just to give a little context of that, when Stonewall happened, that was like her last show. So she had already been through a lot of these different movements. And, there's really nothing that I can pin down on like who started the riot. There's a lot of different stories, like Marsha P. Johnson and the shot glass heard around the world, or somebody threw a brick. But a lot of people attribute her to being the person that was getting arrested and said, why don't you all do something? And threw the first punch, so we don't know. There's a lot of different, mythologies around that. But the point that I want to make clear is that these were not, the upper crust, white cisgender gays and lesbians that were hanging out and participating in these movements. They were mostly people of color, mostly people who really had nothing to lose, were not economically stable, and a lot of times young people. Because young people, regardless of their age, it was a different time back then. A lot of times they would go into the bars just to be able to get out of the elements, and not have to pay, because, they didn't always have a home to go to, because maybe they had been kicked out. So, I just like to highlight that part of it, that it's our movement that had that really big impact was young people and people of color and a lot of trans people as well.
That's it's not surprising. Young people have led all of the great movements,
Yeah.
you know, including the one that's happening right now. And so yesterday was the actual anniversary, June 28th, 1969. And so since then, or that following year, there was a commemoration of it. And so there are lots of myths around that. But also what strikes me is, you know, the mafia owning the stone wall and yet still taking advantage. So they didn't. So that would be rainbow capitalism, actually, because they weren't actually in support of the community, but it was a way to take advantage of a group who had nowhere else to go. And
Yes.
that was, you know, even key, you know, and so there were black pool halls, you know, in another community that couldn't be places, but yet would still get taken advantage of. And so it's, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the pain and trauma and things are common among all marginalized communities. And so it's hurtful, really, that, you know, and the drinks, I heard the drinks were overcharged, you know what I mean? So, you know, kind of making them pay double, you know, for what they would pay at another bar. And
Right, because
so,
it was illegal to serve gay people. It was illegal to serve alcohol to gay people. And so it absolutely was exploitation. But I think it's also important to note that, like, because a lot of our activism has been done and our safe places were bars, it really did solidify kind of the bar culture in our community. Because the bars were our gathering places, you know, and they continued to be, I mean, really still do kind of continue to be our meeting places, although there, you know, it has opened up a lot. And I have to be thankful for the progress that I've seen just in the time that I've been out, which is, you know, 20 years. But I mean, there's stuff that's happened that I never thought would happen. So have to be hopeful for the progress, but also know where we came from, because I think history is so important to me. If we don't look back, it's hard to look forward. Now we can't, you know, stay in that rear view mirror. If you stay in the rear view mirror, you'll crash. But you have to kind of look back every now and then so that you can, you know, inform yourself on where you're going.
so if we look at that as, you know, one of the earliest forms of rainbow capitalism, you know, what challenges have you seen in the business community over time?
So, you know, again, like I'm really grateful that you know, during Pride Month to see all these logos change on Facebook and Twitter, and it's really encouraging and it feels good. And there's also this like, well, are you supporting us all year, or are you just trying to profit off of us during 1 month? Because that's when you can make your money. And it's not just our money. Like, now it's getting bigger and bigger because there's a lot of allies that want to buy rainbow stuff too, and be included in, you know, as part of the community, as an ally. And so it's really become a huge business. And so what I would encourage people to look at within themselves is, you know, look at policies in your workplace. Are you really for us year round? And I have seen a lot of different commercials, and I can't think of one specifically. I'm sorry, but you know, there are times when I'm like, wait a minute, was that a lesbian couple just there in that commercial? And it's like September, because it's just being put in with other types of families, or you know, a gay arc on a show, where there's a different family, you know. So in advertising and stuff like that, like, if you're just making a splash in June, maybe consider what other kinds of things am I doing in my business to be, you know, an ally. And so it's like looking at your policies, So that's where a lot of criticism comes in from the community is, number one, you only support us through June, or you put a pride flag up on your logo and then you've got discriminatory practices at your business. Where are you hiring? What outlets are you looking to hire people? And are those hiring places inclusive? What's your bathroom access looking like? What's the makeup of your HR department if you have one? If you have nobody that's representative of, that looks like the people that work there, are they going to have their own biases? Are they going to be able to represent you? Are you going to be, seen as a whistleblower if you have legitimate concerns about your workplace environment? So many times, we've heard people in our community, they come to us to tell us these things, to talk about these things. There have been so many workplace violations, and in Nevada, unfortunately, it's just so hard to prove. And so I think people really need to look at themselves. I know that our community is also everybody. And so a lot of us are really into other social justice movements. And, getting into work to be an ally to a community that you don't represent yourself, can be tough. It can be tough to take the time to learn, and that's work that you have to do on your own. But taking that time to read about different communities and different histories, and then look around at who your friends are. And a lot of times cronyism comes into hiring practices. And so if that's the case, then who are you hanging out with? Because if all of your friends look exactly like you, and then you're hiring them, that could be a problem. So
exactly. I'd like to just have a question about a couple of things that you said. One was, the community is everybody, right? And so then sometimes they're focused on some of the other identity issues, that they may be dealing with. I have found in the communities or the companies that I work with, sometimes many people don't want to say, and I think that particularly around sexual orientation, it's not something we have to know. But how do you suggest a person fight for rights and representation, but yet are still unwilling to actually bring it to the forefront themselves and about themselves? That makes sense.
Can you say that again?
Yes, let me say it in another way. So, for example, I have, so sometimes people of color don't want to, always be the person speaking up for the community, because then you become, oh, let's talk to, Kennedy about, Black female issues. Do you know what I mean? But how do you not become the gay person in the room that every time, but yet still advocate, for yourself without, becoming the gay spokesperson, for example?
For me personally, I think it depends on the person. And for me personally, it's about setting boundaries. Because when I first came out, I don't know, every time I would go to, a bar that was not a gay bar, so like any bar, there would always be, like, every single time there would be this guy that would be like, well, hey, tell me what it's like to be a lesbian. And I'm like, well, Google it, and but there's this pressure of like, what if I'm the only gay person he ever runs into? I want him to have a good experience. so that he gets a good idea that we're there, that we're good people in the community and we don't take things so seriously, you know?
Right.
And so, but like I've had to learn over time that like I can't be that to everybody, you know? And I don't think I'm ever really harsh to people. Even though sometimes, you know, I want to be, but like I'm just not that type of person. And so, you know, if I have the time and energy, I'll talk about it. But you know, other times I just set that boundary and maybe give a couple of websites or something like that. But I think again, going back to your point, like that's tokenizing. So we're becoming the token gay person. And if there's only one token gay person, then that's a problem. There are plenty of us that need jobs out there. So again, where are you marketing to get your base of people that you hire? Not to say that everybody doesn't deserve an opportunity, but like really let's expand the job pool, the hiring pool.
Yeah. Are there any, speaking of that, are there any trusted sites where someone really wanted to be inclusive in their sourcing efforts that you would suggest a company go to?
I off the top of my head, I don't, you know, I mean, it's just kind of out there. I think it's more of getting to know the community. So for example, organizations that partner with the center send us job opportunities, right? So then we can then send those out to our community. We have a community bulletin board that's up in our center. Unfortunately, things are still kind of like that in our community. We are very word of mouth. Like if one person has a bad experience, a lot of people will stop using that site or using that business or attending. Where I come into contact this a lot of times is with the youth. They're apprehensive to utilize resources anyway. And so if one of them has a bad experience, nobody will utilize that resource. But on the other hand, if it only takes one person to have a good experience for those barriers to come down and for people to come in. And so it really is about like people in the community who people trust. So if you have, you know, a center and they have events, go to the center events. If you have other LGBTQ organizations that are having events, go to those events. In other communities too. If somebody's celebrating a holiday that's different than yours, go to their events and get to know the people that are there. Because then you can call those friends and say, hey, look, do you have anybody in your community that would be interested in this job? So I think it's really more about getting out of your comfort zone to make that real effort. But I would also caution people to know a little bit about, you know, have a little understanding about bias, discrimination. People don't really, they get very defensive when you want to talk about privilege. You know, read some books about that, like, you know, Unpacking the Knapsack is an oldie but goodie. You know, there's books out there. You could put it on an audio when you're going for a run or, you know, in your car. So yeah.
Why do you think people are so uptight about privilege?
Well, because I think that most people don't have a life of luxury that they can just do whatever they want. And so people get defensive. I've found over time that when I talk about privilege or I talk about women's issues, misogyny, with men in particular, they get super defensive because they don't see themselves as that person. That maybe that exists, but it doesn't exist with me. And I'm like, okay, but this thing and this thing and this thing happened. And so to me, because I see it all the time, like it's harder, it may be harder for you to see it, and you're defensive because your life has not been perfect either.
Right.
And so you don't want to be called, and most people don't want to be a bad person. And so I think it's fear of being a bad person is the biggest part of it. They don't want to be seen in that way. And then when you talk about privilege, I think that it's like, you know, this whole idea that we have in America, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I did that. I got this. And, you know, and I had to work really hard for it. And it's like, okay, yeah, but you didn't have these barriers also. And so, but it's hard for people to kind of identify that. And I think that privilege is a perfect place to start. If you really want to change, you really want to be a good ally, like really get into privilege, really, you know, read some books about privilege, listen to some podcasts about privilege, listen to what that really means, other than like having this idea of some social justice warrior screaming to you about, you know, how bad of a person you are. Like, I think if people really got out of the buzzwords and the narratives that are provided for them in their own echo chambers, like, you can break out of this and learn some different things. And not that you're a bad person now, but we can all be better. We can all learn, and we should all be growing. I mean, I don't like to say should, but it's my belief that people have the ability to learn and grow, and that they should be interested and curious forever for the rest of your life. Because you're 80 doesn't mean that you don't still have the ability to read and expand your mind.
Right. Right. Oh, that's good stuff. And so then can you talk a little bit about any of the thought differences within the community on some of the topics we've talked about? Is there, you know, any real different point of views that you come across within the community?
Yeah. So, you know, as I mentioned with myself, like, you know, I'm really excited to see all these logos. It makes me feel the pride. And, you know, for me, pride is like the opposite of shame, right? Like, I'm not hiding who I am. I'm able to walk in the world with confidence and be okay with myself. And, you know, when we moved into this, we've been in our house for a year, and when we first moved in, we moved in June, and our neighbor behind us had put up a pride flag, and it was not just a rainbow flag, but the progress flag. So it's got the arrow with the trans colors in it, and, you know, and the black and brown stripes as well. And I was like, oh, this is, you know, not just somebody who, I don't know who they are, you know, like they may be an ally. If they're an ally, then they know what's going on in the community, you know? So that stuff makes me feel safer. There is something about that makes me feel proud. It does make me go, oh, this, you know, this company is supporting us. That's great. And then on the other side of that is, well, they're making money off of us. And then you get into the, like, you know, HRC, the Human Rights Campaign Equality Indexes, and really get into what these companies are doing year round. I love it when somebody has picked an organization and they're donating the proceeds, part of the proceeds even, back to the community somehow. That's a really great gesture of like, yeah, we're profiting off of you, but also we're investing in your community by giving back. That's a really great thing to do. And so, but, you know, on the, I think in all of our human rights movements, there are the people that are going to be extreme. They're the ones that are going to be out there protesting in the streets. And they are so necessary and vital to our movements because they get attention. And then, you know, there's people like me who are advocating on the ground, getting older. So that stuff is kind of not my brand anymore personally, but I know that it's necessary. And then you have, the legislative part of it too. And so one of the criticisms also is that, yeah, you put a rainbow flag up as your logo and you're donating a bunch of money to politicians who are legislating against us,
Right.
and so then it becomes a point of hypocrisy, and that can really get you in trouble. Like, if you're donating money to people who are creating policies that are anti-LGBTQ or, anti any other marginalized group, like, really don't advertise it.
Right.
Don't make a special pair of sneakers because you don't care. And it's obvious.
Yeah, so it's about being inauthentic, not real, fake, and that is a horrible feeling. One other on that side that you shared with me, a virtue signaling. Can you tell me what that is and how businesses can be better allies than what we just described?
Yeah, so a lot of times it is just virtue signaling, which is like you're putting, you're making yourself feel good, like you're doing something that makes you feel good, makes you feel like you've done something, but it's not actually informed by what's going on in the community or what the community needs.
Yeah.
And so this happens a lot, like, people will donate stuff to us, and it's not stuff that we need, but it's like maybe something, that's an expensive item, that they're like, oh, these poor gay kids could really use, a really expensive pool table, and we'll have somebody come in and measure it and, get it, whatever. And it's like, okay, that's great, but we also are a community center. We have to move these things sometimes. Like, it can't just, and so, does it really work? Yeah. Is it really nice? Yes, it is really nice. Another option would be like, hey, buy this pool table. We'll pay to have it set up in your place. And then the money we get from selling the pool table, we'll give it to the center. Right. Or like, this woman, and please understand, like, we appreciate it. I'm not trying to shame anybody. It's much appreciated. We had a lady that was one time, crocheting eggs for us, like little crocheted eggs. And she wanted us to sell them and make a bunch of money. And so she's like giving us a business plan to sell her product. And so it's like, okay, great. You're making these things that are, really nice. Good job. But then also like giving us a job to, so that we can make money with your business. I'm not sure exactly how that was supposed to work, but things like that, where people are doing good things, they have good intentions, but let's get a little bit more informed about what people need. If you want to volunteer, ask what is needed, and not like, well, I'm going to volunteer, but I'm going to do this, and then that's going to create 16 other jobs for us to make your feel-good event happen. Because it's really more about making yourself feel good than actually helping the community with what they need. And a lot of people just don't ask, and so if you're not asking those questions, if you're not having deeper conversations with yourself, if you're not digging in a little bit more, if you're not involving yourself in our communities, then you may be just virtue signaling. You may just put a rainbow shirt on and go, I'm doing this and it makes me feel good. Great. That's great. Also, like, look at what's happening with the community, because when you talk about the pink economy, like, most people, when they're talking about that, they are looking at, they call them DINK, which is the dual income, no kids, right? And so a lot of people, when they look at our community, they just see like the rich gay man, right? There's two men that they don't have kids, so they've got all this extra money. And sometimes that's true, but you're not looking at the people who are in really tough situations, like especially our trans community, that are subjected to violence every single day, that don't have a place to go. And so if people, that's why I think it's so important to talk about the history and what's really going on, because if people think we're all just like, oh, living our happy lives and having a parade every day, like that's not the reality for most of our community. And so we have to have that information so that we can inform where we're putting our energy. Quite frankly, if you're going to volunteer, make it count. And the only way you can do that is by getting involved with community and asking what they need.
Yeah, that is great. This has been a great conversation. You brought up so many points. I was actually going to start writing them down so I could list them, but I'm on the second page. So there's so much that you did. So I'll do a blog after this, just trying to call all the great information you've given. So how would you want to wrap this up? Like what, because you have said so many things, if you could distill it down to a couple of things you want people to know or move forward, if you can, just kind of let us know.
Just again, get involved in the community, show up to our events. We've got a show, we've got the play Rent coming up at the center. So this is something anybody can attend for the next couple of weeks. That's a fundraiser for an organization that we're partnering with called Broadway in the Hood, which is an amazing organization. And they're really good. I saw the preview they're really good, like really good. So, you can do stuff like that. Auction items. We have like a lot of organizations do annual events. So we have like the center has the honorarium in October every year. That's where you could give us your crocheted eggs, because we'll take everything and your pool table and everything. We'll take it all for the honorarium for our auction items. That's time, man. Come bring us whatever you want at that time. But I think, read, get involved in the community. The other thing is I don't want to get into like specific politicians, but Bill Clinton was on a show and he talked about, that people have these ideas. So there's like, you say 70% of people are for the LGBTQ community. 70% of people are for this, for that, for the, I don't want to bring up tough topics, but like the majority of people want these things, but our laws are going this way. And so what he said was, you may like this guy's tie better than my tie, but it doesn't mean that you're going to vote for him. You're going to vote for me. And so I want to put that in context, because basically what he was saying is that you may be for something, but it's not big enough in your life to be a voting issue. And so I want people, if you're a true ally, like I need you to make LGBTQ existence a political issue. I want it to be an issue that's big enough for you to go, you know what? These people, this person is going to protect these people. This person is not. I have to, vote for this person. And most of the time, it's not a one issue thing. I used to get a lot of criticism when I first came out for, oh, well, you're just a one issue voter. You're just going to do what's good for the LGBT community, and I'm like, well, that's my life. So that's my right. Yeah. To protect myself. But there's all of these other issues that come up, and it doesn't mean that there's like one party over the other that is going to be, better or worse for us. It really does come down to like individual candidates. And so just please make that a voting issue. Make it important enough to be a voting issue. Or look at other communities and make that a priority when you cast your ballot. And please cast your ballot.
I think I put that up there. Please cast your ballot. That is so important. So what I will say is that this has been an amazing conversation with you today, AJ, and thank you so much for being authentic and true. AJ and I were a part of the 2020 Emerge class. So what's been going on with your political career? Are you ready to run for something?
So I had to move again, and I've had a lot of personal setbacks in my personal life, but I think things are back on track with being able to move on and move forward. So I really am looking at it, and hopefully that there will be an opportunity soon. It's just going to depend on, where I live and what I want to run for. Had I been in a better position, I wish I would have had the ability to run for school board trustee this time, because it's where things are really messed up right now. And I really hope that whoever is, going up against some of these trustees, that they really get their message out. So if anybody's doing that and they want help getting their message out, let me know.
Great. And then to get in touch with the center or your information, how would you like people to get in touch with you or the center?
The easiest way is to just go to thecenterlv.org.
Okay. Put that up. All right. You are amazing. Thank you again for joining us, all of you who've decided to be a part of this, and we'll be sure to make sure that people know where to go in order to support you. Good luck with the play Rent. Hope it raises lots of money, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you, AJ.
Thanks again. Bye.